So we've got a few minutes for questions from the floor, if anyone would like to. I'll repeat the questions back so that you can hear them over the mic. Tammy.
Given your presentation, you talked about how government Colombia has dressed up some civilians as park guerrillas to cover up killing them. What's the real reason why they killed these civilians?
They did it to increase body count because there was a bonus paid for each civilian killed. But that's a separate story. I prefer to talk about that one privately after the talk. Any questions on the drugs element? Yes.
I wanted to know what category of people normally use crack. Because you made mention of the general idea of how blacks are used crack. And at what age group is the highest right now?
Sure. The question was, what are the kind of category of people? What's the demographic for these drug users? The best data that I have is from a survey carried out by a friend of mine called the Global Drug Survey. And in it he found that 12% of his respondents were taking it, and they were aged between 18 and 25 mainly. And then it kind of tapered off with maybe kind of 15 to 20% of users from the main body who were between 25 and 35. So young people, urban people, educated people, all sorts of people. I mean, it's kind of from 18 to 25, pretty much the same as standard drugs. But yeah, that's about the age group and the range. Yes?
Would you classify opiate painkillers as a legal high, given that it's an epidemic both in terms of use and death in this country?
Would I classify opiates, legal opiates, as a legal high? Yes, I think in many ways it actually meets the credentials. It's the distribution of them is different. It's actually much more organised. The production of them is of a higher quality. It's of a it's much more widespread. I think certainly if you look at the use levels in the US where these drugs are mainly prescribed. Yes, I think that I don't know whether I'd describe it as an epidemic. I haven't done the research, and I do tend to sort of shy away from those phrases, but certainly I would describe them as it's a legal alternative to heroin. And when people don't have heroin, when there is no heroin available, people will very often take OxyContin or hydrocodone or any of these synthetic opiate replacements. So, but there are even on the international legal highs market, there are some alternatives currently, such as there's a drug called methyltramadol, which is tramadol with just a couple of different functional groups attached. Another drug called AH7921, which has killed a few people in the UK already, which is a drug that targets the opiate receptors. So yeah, definitely. Any more questions? Dan Stageman.
I'm actually going to point to the slide that I was looking at here. Here we go. So I'm noticing a difference between these two Silk Road slides.
Yeah.
This one lists prices in Bitcoins, and this one lists them in dollars. I know that these are two different different generations of the Silk Road,
Yeah.
totally different sites. But why the change to a dollar-based economy as opposed to a Bitcoin economy?
I did that this morning. It's a very well designed and functional site, and you see my name on the top right hand corner, Mike Power. Underneath it says settings. You can choose to display it in about 50 different currencies. So they have a currency converter on site. So yeah, that's the price. In bitcoins, currently Bitcoin's about $600 today, I think, or £400, something like that. So the Bitcoin story is a really fascinating one. It's one that I think will become very much more prominent in the next few years. This is a currency that you can send from one person to another anywhere in the world. Nobody can trace it. You can buy it anonymously in the US with cash, in corner stores in certain ways, and various other kind of grocery stores. And then you can send this money around and have illegal drugs like this posted to your house. So, any other questions? Yes.
Do you think that the solutions are necessarily global solutions?
That's a really good question. The problem is global, or rather, I think problem is a difficult word. The situation, the phenomenon is global. The phenomenon of drug taking is global. The phenomenon of drug prohibition is global, and the phenomenon of legal highs and of dark web markets, that also is global. So those categories are all there. I don't really see how you could have a global solution to such a disparate problem as this, and it's also very localized. So you know, in the US, you have a huge or much larger problem with methamphetamine, rates of usage of methamphetamine than we do in the UK. So what's good in the US isn't going to work there. But again, when we talk about problem, what's the solution? You know, is your definition of a solution legalization, or is your definition the eradication of all drugs? What would your sort of suggestion be?
Well, I don't know. I think you were suggesting that we need new kinds of solutions, and I'm not sure what you probably have some ideas of what the parameters of those solutions should be.
Indeed, yeah. I think that the parameters of the solutions and the solutions have to be radical. I think that from what I've discovered, from what I've researched, every single step that we take to try to control drugs increases the production of drugs. It increases the production, the price goes lower, and the quality goes higher. So what we're doing currently doesn't work. So I think that we have to just look at it and say, let's actually find a way to reduce the harm of drugs. Let's look at a way to take the money out of the hands of criminals and gangsters, and let's find a way to increase purity and health information about these drugs, so that they're not adulterated, and so that people know what's going to kill them and what's not. I think that's the parameter has to be health. You know, views on drug legalization are subjective. Health is not subjective. We need to protect people's health. To me, that's the guiding principle. We should keep people healthy and alive. So that's the broadest and simplest paradigm and kind of parameter that I can think of. Yes.
I was just wondering, first of all, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
When you talk about it being health as a priority, so do you see the medical community leading this effort and with support from criminal justice, government, et cetera? Because obviously it takes all of us at the table, but I'm curious from your perspective.
I think that the health community, excuse me, certainly have a leading role to play. What we're looking at here is people taking chemicals that affect their health. So of course they have to have a leading role. I mean, let's look at a situation with, we have cannabis, which is less harmful than alcohol, but one is sold, taxed, and is very profitable for international corporations, and one is banned. Now, I want to see evidence-based policy. I want to see policy that consults with user groups and that consults with communities and that consults with the medical profession. Certainly, and yes, I do think that the medical community has a leading role to play in this, rather than a kind of a justice or a punitive or a prison, or jailing people doesn't keep them healthy. Helping them to remove their addiction or helping them to make more rational choices or to make safer choices in their drug use will save us money. It will save us money, and it is a less problematic approach, I think.
I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you.
And I can assure you I'll be assigning it to my graduate students.
That's great news.
And I write about heroin. And I was just wondering, I haven't read your book yet. Do you talk about heroin? You made one comment in your presentation.
Yeah, sure.
Is heroin part of your story?
Heroin is part of my story at the beginning. The question was, is heroin part of my story? Heroin is part of my story at the beginning, when I described that heroin was actually one of the first designer drugs. Heroin was created in the laboratory I've outsourced my memory to my book. I need to consult.
And then marketed in the 1890s.
Yeah, and so this drug was actually invented. Heroin was invented, believe it or not, as a way to help people avoid addiction. It was to help them wean them off morphine. And so the designer drug industry, it feels like it really came along in the 1980s with ecstasy. That was where the term was first used. But really, a designer drug is just it's a chemical. It's a chemical that's been worked in the laboratory. So heroin was the original designer drug. And then immediately, again, interestingly to note, as soon as heroin was banned, legal versions of heroin were created with various other functional groups and benzyl groups attached and propyl groups. So the story of chemists manipulating drugs to circumvent national and international drug control, it's as old as the hills, but it is coming to prominence once more. Yes?
Just briefly, so I'm just wondering, I just got to read chapter 10 in the book.
first part of your question, what makes a drug legal or illegal, it's really broad and it's huge. Each country has its own drug laws, and then each country is a signatory to the United Nations Convention, which bans the 234 drugs that I mentioned before. So each country has its own drug laws, and then each of those drug laws is kind of different. Now that's part of the story. What's interesting is that as the internet has kind of destroyed time, space, and national borders, the drug laws really don't have much weight. They don't have any relevance. So there are drugs that you can buy in Spain, which are legal in Spain, but illegal in France, in the next country. So that's one kind of key thing that the internet's changed. It's made drug laws redundant. It's made them unenforceable in certain ways because you can just have them posted. You know, the United Kingdom has like 80 million pieces of post per day. That's the United Kingdom, or one small island in Europe. Think about that in like an American context. So postal order drugs is a key part of this. So that's what makes drugs legal or illegal. It's just the decision of each country based upon, well, frankly, arbitrary kind of parameters. The next part of your question was about decriminalisation through Latin America. Well, we look at Uruguay and we see the president of Uruguay has specifically attempted to remove marijuana, cannabis, from the banned list. And he said, okay, let's take it out of the hands of gangsters by selling it at $1 a gram. Let's sell it for less than the gangsters. Let's undercut organised crime. Now that's really clever. That's really smart. That's like what better way to prevent somebody operating in a market than to take away their profits? And you know, Uruguay hasn't fallen into the sea and society hasn't collapsed. You know, the states of Washington and Colorado haven't ground to a halt because of the recreational use of marijuana. You know, I mean, even the name marijuana is an old racist construct. It's actually cannabis, obviously. Marijuana was what the Mexican workers called cannabis. And so back in that era, the name was used in order to demonize the drug rather than it being seen as a simple, you know, relaxing smoke. So, yeah, throughout Latin America, in Mexico, they have decriminalized marijuana. They have decriminalized personal possession of cocaine and ecstasy. Colombia is arguing for the same, and they have decriminalized around cannabis and cocaine. And I think that will be seen. I think that we'll see a domino effect as each country basically defies the United States and defies the United Nations and puts in place their own experimental drug policy, which, let's face it, is a response to policy not working. In which other area of public policy do we see that it doesn't work, yet we persist with it? We don't have that mentality in any other area of public policy. It's like if we were educating people and they couldn't speak French or English at the end of 5 years in school, we would change the system. After 60 years of the war on drugs, we have more drugs on sale, we have more profits, we have more death and more destruction than was caused before. So we have a policy that's discredited and doesn't work, but we persist with it for, well, who knows why. Yes. Sorry, I've had one from you. I'm going to take one from the guy at the back. Yes.
Oh,
yeah, you're going to have to really shout.
Oh, okay. Do you think the popularity of the internet serves as the strongest ally in the discussion on legalizing drugs?
I'm so sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Do you think the popularity of the internet serves as the strongest ally in the discussion on legalizing drugs?
Do I think that the popularity of the internet has served it? I'm so sorry. Excuse me. I think that the internet helps communities coalesce, and I think it helps create a kind of a coalition of consciousness. I think that it helps people come together and to create communities. And yeah, I think that that's contributed to this argument. I think the internet has created a smaller world where you can find out about policy in Uruguay like that. You know, so yeah, I think it possibly has. Any more questions? Right at the back, but you're going to have to come forward and shout.
I'm curious. Like, you said you created a new drug, but
Yeah.
what did you do after that? Like, did you try to market it? Did you bring it to lawmakers and say, hey, look how easy this was to me? You
Okay.
know, like,
Yeah,
what
okay.
was that?
Yeah, I think I might have skipped over that bit. I said that I created a new drug, and you asked what I did next. I wrote a story about it. I wrote a story, I wrote an 8,000 word story about how easy it is to make and to create a new drug. I mean, I didn't commercialize it, I didn't market it, but I did ask the guy for a kilo. I said, how much would a kilo be? And he told me it would be not very much money. If I wanted to, I could have taken that drug, sold it in the United Kingdom completely legally, and I would be a millionaire today. Instantly, in the space of probably, I'd say 2 months. Yeah, completely legal tax. I'd pay my taxes, I'm a respectable citizen, you know. So yeah, no, I didn't do anything with it. It's in my drawer at home. I was going to send it to a laboratory, a different laboratory for the guys' toxicology and poison center, but I was quite busy over Christmas and I didn't get a chance. But yeah, it's still at home in my. In fact, you remind me, I need to get it sent. I need it out the house. It might get banned, and then I'm going to be in trouble, you know. Any more questions? Yeah, go on.
You had mentioned that one of the solutions to solve drugs illegally is to public health sector aware of certain drugs. But apparently, we find out that people get addicted to the health drugs being publicized within the hospitals and stuff.
But very often, sorry, your point was that your question was that I argue that health should have a greater hand in drug policy, but many times people are addicted to legal drugs from hospitals. That's true. But really what's happening there is that those drugs are being diverted. It's not people who are being prescribed them. The majority of those who are addicted to prescription opiates or tranquilizers or benzodiazepines, they're actually diverted and just bought illicitly on the black market, or they're bought, you know, from friends or anything like that. So what I think is important to kind of to establish in any discussion around this, nothing will fix everything. No legalization, having heroin vending machines on the street is not going to fix anything. Having licensed premises where you can buy cocaine of various purities is not going to solve the drug problem. What it will solve is it will instead improve the situation incrementally. It will make drug policy more rational. It won't stop people taking drugs. I mean, in my book, one of the first things I looked into was what was the first ever recorded use of drugs? And it was 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago in Thailand, someone was found, that they found and carbon dated a quid, a kind of a pouch of a stimulant that someone was chewing. They found this in a cave 9,000 years ago. It's a human instinct to take drugs. I would guarantee that everyone in this room is taking drugs today. I mean, there's a vat of coffee over there. Now, you know, 200 milligrams of caffeine, it would put me right on edge. I can't drink 3 espressos, you know. If you were to take all of the coffee, all of the caffeine in that jug over there and concentrate it into one small cup, it would kill you. If you took a cigarette and you extracted all of the alcohol, all of the nicotine from it, it would kill you. You can kill a horse with a packet of cigarettes, you know. So it's about dosage, it's about information, it's about behaviour. And what we need to do I think in the future with drug policy is to look at behaviour, to look at how people are harmed by their own behaviour, and instead offer them solutions, offer them options, rather than having drug consumption as an illicit or illegal or dangerous activity. Have it as, well, exactly as it is, a consumer choice. And it's a consumer choice with exactly the same risks as drinking too much alcohol. It's a lifestyle choice which has the same danger levels as, for example, ecstasy. Ecstasy use in the UK was famously analysed by one of the government's leading physicians, and he found that using ecstasy was about as dangerous as horseback riding. So your danger from consuming MDMA is about as dangerous as going out on a horse. So why do we not ban horse riding? You know, I'm not arguing that ecstasy is a safe drug. I'm not arguing that it's a great thing to do with your life. What I'm arguing is that we don't have a clear view, because we have this moralistic view of drug use. We have this moralistic view of drugs being evil, wrong, or kind of countercultural. We've projected a whole bunch of stuff that isn't true onto chemicals. They're just chemicals. They're just carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Around it all, we have this cultural and this kind of it's just a projection of cultural values onto chemicals. I think strip that away, make it into a health issue, and then from there we can have a rational, forward-thinking policy. Danny.
So there's been a lot of talk about innovation, and a few examples
Sure. In the early 2000s, Portugal had a huge heroin problem. There were open air heroin markets and open air kind of areas of the city where people were openly injecting heroin. And the Portuguese government decided rightly that it was the wrong kind of society to have, or the wrong kind of social scene to have. And Portugal basically decriminalised all drugs, and they offered people help and health assistance. In that time, injecting rates of heroin use, I think, have gone down by 80%, because people have been brought into a system, brought into a kind of a treatment option. And as well as that, what else has gone on over there? Injecting rates have really dropped, and also new rates of HIV transmission are down by 80%. So, you know, usage levels didn't go up. Suddenly, all of Portugal didn't start injecting heroin into themselves because they weren't going to go to jail for it. But instead, they were healthier. So that's the Portuguese model, which has been to decriminalise, and they're the impact it's had. Then the New Zealand model is interesting. It's an experimental step that New Zealand has taken. Now, New Zealand is so far away that you can't really get drugs in New Zealand. People make their own drugs there. They make their own crystal meth. So the way that the market's developed out there in the last few years, because New Zealand's so isolated, in the words of one guy that I know in New Zealand, he said the cocaine boat doesn't stop in New Zealand, you know. So over the years, the New Zealand kind of drug using culture has been very interested in legal highs. Now, New Zealand became so fed up, they were so completely over the fact that every time a drug was banned, a new one would come to take its place, and they couldn't seem to stamp out this game of chemical whack-a-mole. And they said, okay, let's instead put the onus on the manufacturers. And now in New Zealand, manufacturers can sell a new drug, a new legal drug, so long as it has actually passed various basic health tests. Now, that's a radical and new innovation, and it hasn't actually been, you know, tested to the limit yet. It's only been in place for about a year. But it's a brave step, it's an innovation, and it's the kind of thinking, I think, that we need in the internet era to move the debate beyond legal and illegal, beyond, you know, prison or no prison. It's like, let's look at what people want to do. Some people want to take drugs. We need to get over that. We need to just accept that some people sometimes will take drugs. That's just, it's been going on for 9,000 years. In the modern context, it's been going on for 50 years. People take drugs. It's not a big deal, you know. It's not something that I think is something that is laudatory. It's just a fact of life. It's, people take drugs in the same way as they read books, you know. Not all drug use is problematic, but all drug policy is predicated on the assumption that people who take drugs are addicted or in trouble or any number of things. But there is lots of different reasons for taking drugs and for selling and buying them, mainly economics. And if there's any more questions, I'll take maybe one more. Yes? Do I speak about psychedelics in my book? Yes, I do. I think that psychedelics are a really interesting case study in all drug policy. Because if you look at a psychedelic such as mescaline, you know, or psilocybin, mescaline extracted or taken from peyote cactus, it's been used for thousands of years by Native American people. And there have been studies done which show that they actually have higher levels of mental health, those who have used mescaline extensively on hundreds of occasions through their life, than those who didn't, you know. Obviously that's taken in it's the context I think is interesting with psychedelics and with drugs. Psychedelics, just when they're taken, I think, just randomly, I'm sure that they're not very helpful substances, but I think in a ritualistic or kind of in a kind of, you know, a shamanistic environment, for some people and for some communities and for some cultures, it's a positive thing. And we can't argue against that because the data's there and the history is there. So yeah, I do talk about psychedelics. I talk about the fact that the new psychedelics which are replacing the banned psychedelics are actually far more dangerous. You know, you can't toxicologically overdose on psilocybin. You can't eat enough magic mushrooms to die. You just can't do it. You'll turn into a frog first, you know. But you know, you can quite easily die from many of the new legal psychedelics which are being sold all over the internet right now. Drugs which have names like chemical soup, 25I, MBOME. These drugs are LSD replacements, legal in much of the USA, and they're killing people because they're really potent. So yeah, my book covers all psychedelics from the very first LSD trip and the very first mescaline trip by a conservative politician on camera, which is a fun story, right through to Albert Hofmann inventing LSD in 1943 and right up to 2013. So yeah, everything's in there, all of that. So that was really informative and really enjoyable Q&A. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you for coming.